The devil's a roaring lion this morning. That's why we come to church very early in the morning. Start 9 early. I understand that, Tom. Okay, let's stand and open Sunday school with prayer. I'm happy to see Barbara. John is right home. Cool. Oh, he's sleeping. Yeah. Oh, the medicine makes him dizzy. Pastor is coming to open with prayer.
Thank you, Father, for a beautiful day. There's a song in my heart today, Lord, that sings, I'm living on the mountain underneath a cloudless sky. I'm feasting at the fountain that never will go dry. I'm living in Beulah land. Thank you, Lord, for that opportunity. We bless you in the name of Jesus this morning. We thank you. Your name. Amen.
Okay, you may be seated. We have be transitioning to a different subject, back to talking about the 12 sons of Jacob. We've already gone through 10 sons, believe it or not. We're now on the 11th son, and we'll talk about the 12th son too. But our background, we need to review a little bit. We're in Genesis chapter 49, verses 1 and 2, where it says that Jacob called his sons and said, "Gather together that I may tell you what will happen to you in the last days." It's always an important point to remember is that Jacob, even though he was dying in 1900 about BC, before Christ, he talks about the last days. The last days really was during Christ's time of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 BC, okay, to AD 70 is about that time frame right there. You never see last day. That means the one day, that's it. You don't see that. You see last day. That means a time frame, not just one day. Okay, that's why we see last days refers to talking about Christ's time, that frame. Also, that time is when the Romans government decided somehow their scientists or somewhere in that history time frame, Herod the Great and the Caesar, they changed the time. Daniel talks about them changing time. And so they really did. Instead of counting months and days according to the old way, they changed and they became a new way. And through the process of time, that 1 and 1, there's no 0. 1 and 1, all of that was called BC. And then this is called AD. Okay, there. And it has to do with the Latin word after and before this time. Okay, so now we look at Jacob, who is speaking to his 12 sons at his deathbed. On his deathbed is 1900 BC. and how God used this man, this old man who was 147 years old. He was dying. He was ready to meet God, that he prophesied words of knowledge. He knew what was going to happen to their family. He knew that his sons themselves individually would be gone. And so Jacob was not talking about his sons themselves personally, individually, that they, during their lifetime, while they all lived in Egypt, but rather Jacob gave information about another time almost 2,000 years later. And much of this prophecy over each son also affects even to many times partly of our day also. So we will see here how God used Jacob. I always like to go back to this. It's important information to know. So he tells his sons to come together and listen. Oftentimes we don't stop and listen with understanding. That's what Jacob is telling his sons. I want you to stop. I want you to pay attention what I have to say. That is his hearken. And so he's emphasizing, get together, all of you 12 together, not together. Whoa, many times, you know how sons are, kids are, yeah, old and not know anything, attitude. But the father demanded, it's interesting how he demanded his son's respect. Demanded respect. Often, if people don't demand their respect, then you will not get it. And so that's what we see here, is that Jacob was demanding his sons to give him attention because he had something important. He knew something they did not know. He knew something was very, very important for them in their lives, their family, posterity, and that they needed to memorize what he said, not let it go in one ear and out the other, but to grab a hold of every word, because every word has a key, something behind it, and to grab it and remember fully, not remember half, not remember a little bit, but to remember fully what the Father will say to each one of them. And that it may seem odd, not make sense at that time, but it is the responsibility of each son to pass the same information to the next generation. All right, and then keep passing it down. Okay, now during the time of Moses, he comes along and they grabbed that information because they wrote about what he said. And so they remembered and kept it important in their thinking. And so when it came time to write what they said, they documented and documented and documented. So we will see in our study of the 12 sons individually that leads to the 12 families, and then it led to the 12 tribes until they scattered the world. So our lesson will relate with that today. Now, Jacob, it's good to know about Jacob's history. His name means what? supplanter. Because remember how Jacob was born, his brother was first, and he was born first, but Jacob, while he was in the womb, just a little fellow, just little babies right here, they're probably 6 pounds each, one bigger than the other one, red, hairy, and Jacob was smooth, but Jacob grabbed a hold of his brother's heel. And so they were almost like one baby born. But both at the same time as fast were they were born. And so Jacob forced himself, he pushed himself, he always seemed to demand attention. So from his birth to his death, he demanded attention. Because God instilled in him something. God formed him. Last week we looked at Psalms 91, and then 2 weeks ago 90. We looked at those, and 2 weeks ago we see where God created man and then put him there to go and live in the world, in the earth. Put him and let him move forward and live his own life. All right, with making his own decisions, making his choice. And Jacob's style of who he was a pusher. Demand respect. All right, he demanded attention, and he would not let anyone bully him. No. And even his brother, he was bigger than him. He might have been a runt kid, I don't know. But he and his brothers were good friends, except Jacob competed. He was a competitor. So we see that. And that, you see the words up there is that Jacob twisted himself to attach himself to the Most High God even. Remember when the angel came down and Jacob grabbed a hold of that man, he said, "I will not let you go until you bless me." Jacob did not look for trouble. Jacob wanted his own blessing, full 100% blessing from God. He did not look for ways of evil. He did not look for the ways in the world. From his birth, he wanted God to bless him to be part of his life. That's the way he chose. And it's interesting that he never met his grandfather Abraham, and he never, met his father Isaac until he was born. But inside this baby, Jacob, was something inside that God planted in him, that he had to struggle. He was willing, and he also faced a lot of struggle to get what he wanted. He would fight to get it. And the power spokesman to his 12 sons. Each one of his 12 sons became leaders and princes. And specifically, God endowed each one with something specific in their lives, with a purpose for the last days, even. That kind of stamina. Most people, they live and they die and no one really remembers them. They just live and die and die. But Jacob was not even satisfied with that kind. Even in his death, he demanded stamina from his sons. He demanded their respect, and the one thing he wanted from his 12 sons is their ability to continue through not just their lifetime, but to pass it on through every one of their sons, that every son and the family member had the strength to what? Live. The strength to live. We see during the Holocaust years, during Hitler's time, you see many of those movies, and they always say, they encourage each other. People are dying. You see this dying, and they're so thin, and the bones. And you see these in the movies of the death camps. But you see these people that are horribly thin and seem like they should not be alive. But they encourage each other, live. Just live. They accepted and went through so much damage and hurt and suffering, but they had to live because things would become better and they could tell their story and keep their lives going on and going. That was important to them, not to give up, but to continue on, continue on. That's what Jacob expected out of his 12 sons, and that they would lead in the earth to accomplish their full potential, not satisfied with simple, not satisfied with, oh, that's okay, but they wanted the best quality. And they would analyze and find, oh, that's lousy, forget that. I want this. The best. They looked for that. And that's what Jacob wanted with his 12 sons, and he taught that to them. We can see how Jacob was successful with that because he's such a bull-headed man. You know, want to get it. We can see here that the birth order, and we're now coming to Joseph. Okay, and then the last one would be Benjamin. We see that's the way of the birth order. And Jacob prophesied first to Joseph's 2 sons in chapter 48. All right? And then in Moses, though, you will see up here, it's kind of in the middle, Benjamin and then Joseph and his 2 sons. You see where that was 1,500 BC, about 1458 BC. You see those two? And it seems Joseph, Benjamin, and up here it's Benjamin, Joseph, so it's reversed. It's reversed there. But during Joshua's day, when the group acquired land, we see that it was Reuben, Gad, and then half of Manasseh, and then Judah, and then Joseph and Ephraim and Manasseh. Within the next week or 2 weeks, we will see some interesting parts related with this family and how they possessed the land and how they moved on and how transitions happen. And so they're kind of an interesting part in our lessons that's coming up. Then we see here is Benjamin. You see that Joseph's family are clumped together. It's like the hand servants, boys, they're clumped together. These 4 sons and then 2, even though they're born down, they have 4 of the servant's sons right here, and then but Jacob puts them up there. You see right here. See in the picture Zebulun, and you see Issachar right below four older sons. That's how Jacob prophesied to his 6 sons that belonged to Leah, and then four for the servants that belonged to Leah and Rachel. Then you see on the bottom 2 that belonged to Rachel. Rachel was the younger daughter. Our lessons will be Genesis chapter 49 and Deuteronomy chapter 31. We will see the pictures related with this, that you will see our story will be with Joseph. You see the different pictures. We'll talk about that, but now I'm just going to introduce the pictures to you to see that you can get a taste of what that is. You see that Joseph, when he was born and grew up to about just before he was 17 years old, he had visions. God gave him visions, and about it looked like that his father and the mother and his brothers would bow to him, and that caused jealousy among the other brothers. All of them, they didn't like it, and they revenged on him, and they sent him off to Egypt. Then we know I changed the color of the background, and because I did not catch this one. It's dark, and then it's blue, and I can't see the thing. There, that better? We see here the words give a key point about Joseph, the 11th son belonging to Jacob. He was a dreamer, he was separated, but he thrived. Thriver, I threw in. He lived through, yes, but how did he live through? He did not let obstacles him. He learned how to wait on God. First, he recognized who God is, waited at the right time, and then showed his leadership skills. That's how he thrived. And when it was time to work, he worked hard. He knew how to plan, knew how to be fair. He knew how to cause the Egyptian king to be prosperous. He knew how to lead and encourage a whole country, not just one, my family, not just my 11 brothers and 1 sister, family, all of them, not just led them, he led the whole country through a famine time. We see how his brothers planned to, and threw him out of the family, but God used that to put him into a place that God could use for a better purpose, a more prosperous way in his life, to save people's lives, because the famine during that time was so awful that all could have died. But he was able to save, and God used Joseph. And then we will see how he was a blessed vine. And to give you an idea of a vine, it's like this. A vine. Now tell me, what is a vine like? Give me the character of a vine. Vine. Connect, 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 connect. A vine itself, not Jesus, but the vine, yes. Very, very strong. Can't break it. All right. What else about it? Oh, flexible and growing. So you see the picture. It's not like a tree. Stays in one place, right? A tree, you plant it and it grows up, right? And has big roots. But a vine does a different kind of work. I'm going to talk about that in a minute too. We're going to talk about Jacob talked to his son and called him, see the word up there, a B-O-U-G-H. B-O-U-G-H. And also, it sounds the same, B-O-W. It's not bow. What is that? B-O-U-G-H and B-O-W. B-O-W. It is made to thrive. Thrive. Remember we talked about Joseph himself. Thrive. I'll use that sign. Thrive and live with not mean but hard worker. That's Joseph. And also another way is Progенerator. Progenitor. A motor? Well, what is a progenitor? What is that? Progenitor. Okay. Create. Create what? Create what? Progenitor. Create what? It creates people. God used him to, okay, born what? Born what? Well, Joseph did not have 12 sons, but had a big family, yes. And he would have generations, and where did the generations? One. Okay, we'll talk about that a little later. Now, with Moses, 400 years later, Moses talks about, and I put the word Joe to make it easier spelling, Joe. He talks about a blessing related with land. All right? His father talked with Joe and told him, we'll have a bow, B-O-U-G-H, and I'll show you a picture a little different later, and a B-O-W, that one, we'll show you a picture, and will be to thrive, and progenitor and vine field. But Moses talked about land and his descendants, family, blessing from 8 different ways. We'll show you 8 different ways. And so when I've given you these, right here, has on there. That's why I gave you these. And so some of you don't have it. Be prepared to talk about that next week. Okay, right now I'm just going to give you introduction to help remember. So we have this, plus there's 2 papers here, right here. Okay?
Go ahead.
Separate. There's 2. They're gonna give it to you. The class is getting bigger than I expected, so hopefully there's enough. Hope I made enough. Maybe just enough, okay? All right. And then also, Moses identifies Joseph as a unicorn, like a horse with a horn. And the purpose with that horn was to gather. Remember, Jacob told his son, come together, pay attention. Now he's to Joseph, you like Moses did 400 years later. Said, you're like a unicorn that will gather. We'll talk about explaining those details. Now remember when we talked about Asher, that was completely different. We talked about Dan, he was the lion, snake, different than this. So every individual is so much different, and God's purpose for each one is all different. So next week we will talk about this, and I just put it up to show you what it looks like. I'm not intending to use that as example because I know you can't see it. I'm just showing you which one. That's this. I'm just showing you. This one is Psalms 80. So we're going to compare next week related with Genesis chapter 49 related with Joseph, and Deuteronomy chapter 33, 13 through 17, and Psalms chapter 80, how all of those benefit and what God's word talked about Joseph, okay? All right. I understand. Okay. Joseph, when he was born, I'm not interested in Benjamin right now. So Joseph, when he was born, his mother's name Rachel. And the reason why I put that up there, Rachel, must understand about Rachel and Leah and every person related with Jacob is that all of their sons, and Rachel was the lead builder of a house. The word Ben itself relates with son, and they were building a house. Now, what does that really mean? Is that important? Yes, because not everybody that has children believes or thinks about, oh, I want to build my family. To build a house means to build a family for the purpose of to become leaders in the world. All right? Jacob and Rachel, their goal was to build a family. Even though Rachel died very young, she died while she was pregnant and Ben was born, and she died. Her name refers to building a house for God, R-A-C-H-E-L, relates with God. She was interested in building God's house. All right, and so there's many different ways you can view that. In her life looked to God first and recognized that He is the one that builds my house, my family. He's the one that builds me. So what kind of people do I build? What kind of people did Rachel and Jacob build? That's why Jacob is very, very strict with his sons, even though they lived, they seemed to be part of them, while even though they were servants' kids, it did not matter. They belonged to Jacob. He accepted all of them. Even though they seemed to be good or bad, even though he punished them, like Reuben, he lost the first blessing. He kept the first place because he was born first, and they mention him first, but to receive that big blessing that we're talking about next week, what kind of blessing Jacob received, and Joseph received what kind? Just where to go? It's in front of me. Right here. It's this type. The kind that was not like a tree, one place, stay in one place. No. Joseph's kind of blessing that he received, the way he would build his house is like a vine. The way, and Rachel said, let God add. Augment means to add and add and add and add without stop. Without stop. To add and add and add 1900 BC and on to Christ's time and beyond Christ's time and to eternity, and also affect heaven as well, that God let Joseph be part to effect of who lives in heaven too. And so we see that this family was very interested and very strict with the concept of building and foundationing each other to keep each other strong, not to be careless, in who they married. They married, they had children and their servants. They had this cluster to grow, and together they were able to everywhere. That's what God was doing here. Now, Benjamin is a different story. That last son, his story is completely different. We will go into that later, and we will talk about that. But you need to know now that the 12th son, his life is different, not the same as the 11th son. It's completely different. God had a different purpose for him. It's not the same, different. So let's look a minute. Joseph, how is he? Augment means add. What is the word that describe Joseph what? He add, support. That's how he became a leader. Did not support self-centered. He was not that kind of person. Even though he had visions and God told him and then he talked about them, but his purpose was not to elevate self. His brothers misunderstood him, thought he meant to better than us, and made them mad and jealous. But that was not his purpose. They misunderstood him. And he was young at the time and maybe a little foolish to mention it, but God used that. God's purpose was to take him out of the family and to put him over there and separate for a while so that they would be saved. All right, and then back together so that they would grow. But he had to take him out. And we will see the purpose of the taking out later. Also would expand, make bigger, to add, and to increase and boost, and to extend, to make loud, to, like a magnifying glass. You use sometimes, can't see that word. Barbara, I've seen her use a magnifying glass. That's the same thing with to make and to grow bigger. Now, Benjamin, when he was born, his mother, Rachel, called him grief. Son of my sorrow, before she died. That meant grief, sorry. Can't be with him. Not sorry she got pregnant. Sorry she can't be there with him. And it's deep sadness if you can't be with your children. And it upset her that she was dying. She couldn't do anything about it. I'm dying. There's nothing I can do. The body was weak. The body bled out. The baby was born and the body bled out. What can she do? There was no blood transfusions during that time. And so she felt her life was full of trouble. She felt full of trouble because she had struggled with her sister. Her father put the sister ahead of her when Jacob loved her. And so there was this constant struggle in the family also. So there was struggle upon struggle and frustration. She faced that, and now her last struggle is that her body was worn out and she died. But Jacob said, no. That baby will not have that name. Ben-Oni, son of my sorrow. No. Jacob did not accept that. He accepted all of the other names, but in death, he would not accept a negative. Not accept sorrow words over his son. It's interesting that we need to speak blessings over our kids and family, not give them the negative, overbearing sorrow and say you're bad, no good, lousy. We must give them support. Don't do that. Do this. This is better result for you. You do that, you will have problems. I don't want to see you have problems. Do this. Never say you're lousy. Sometimes if you lost your mind, but here, Jacob said he is son of my right hand, son of my right hand, right here. And when you have son of the right hand, so if he stood on the right hand of Jacob, Jacob's right hand, so he was left, so he would hold his father, it would be his left hand, right there, right? And so Benjamin became famous for left-hand slingers. It's kind of how these different little things became part of their lives in a full way. And that Benjamin would be a helper and a lieutenant, and he would be famous too, but not the same way as Joseph. We're going to look at Genesis chapter 49. You can see the beginning part of the verse, and this is Benjamin. I'm just going to throw the one. Benjamin shall be a raven, R-A-V-N. Remember we talked about raven related with something else. But here he's a raven. He will be like a wolf. That's what his father mentions him. Raven like a wolf. In the morning he will devour the prey, and at night he will divide the spoil. That's Benjamin. But Moses says a different thing. He says, the beloved of the Lord shall dwell safely by Benjamin, and the Lord will cover him all day, and he shall dwell between his shoulders. When we get finished talking about Joseph, we're going to be talking about this. It's going to be a different way. We have to stop and look at the land where they lived. You have to look at the land and the map. So you will see on the map, you will see, okay, right down here, south is Judah, right here. And there was Jerusalem, right there. Now Jerusalem is in the land of Benjamin. Now how come Jerusalem, we'll explain that later too. There's so many things later. And we understand that God's word gives us knowledge right here. But Benjamin lived right there. Jerusalem's right here. Judah is right here. They're just together. But Joseph's two sons, there's no place right there called Joseph. It's two sons. So right up there is Ephraim, and then Manasseh. Manasseh is double blessings right there. They joined there, right there, right there. So that's why Moses tells Benjamin, the beloved of the Lord shall dwell in safety by him. And so when you look at the land, you don't see the people, you don't see Benjamin in any other way throughout the time of Genesis, where Benjamin seems to be supporting anyone except he has a large family, and that anyone safe within him until they move into the land in Israel during Joshua's time. we see his story seems to begin right after Moses said that. And it talks about his land. So we will talk about that next 2 weeks. So I'm introducing different issues related with the story as background information. Okay, this will begin next week. We're finished with the Sunday school lesson today. It is now 9:52 already. And so I've given you a lot of introduction words to explain what to expect. So next week we will explain Joseph. All right, I'm stuck. Thank you. It's been an odd morning. It's good to see everyone. Elaine, it's wonderful to see you. Want to come up and close our Sunday school with prayer? I'm so happy to see you this morning. Not seen you for over 2 months. 2 months? Come ahead. Great to see you. Almost the same. Come on, where I am. You have to come right here.
What do you want?
I said, oh, yeah. I thought you were pointing at him. Okay, we're here now. We're forced to know. Okay, praise the Lord. God is good. Okay. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you and we praise you.